Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's Friday, yeah, bo. Oh my goodness, I'm always excited when it is a Friday. Welcome to it. This is Vuka Nazo, your morning news analysis show. My name is Cyril Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. Guys, remember, if you love the show, then please do me a favor, hit that like button and share the stream, especially if you're watching the simulcast on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube in particular, then also subscribe to the channel. It helps grow my numbers. We've broken the 40,000 mark. We're nearing 41,000. I really appreciate that. Help me reach my goal of 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Guys, please support the channel. Anything between 50 Rand to 100 Rand a month. On average, people give about 75 Rand per person per month. And how you do that, of course, is by going to our website at bigdaddyliberty.com. There, you'll find a payment method that suits you. Now, with that being said, enough with the jibber jabber. It's a jam-packed show. Let's get straight to the news. Okay, this one annoys me. I'm sorry, I'm going to annoy a lot of you guys. We're going to disagree on this issue, but fudge it, that's the whole point of freedom of speech. I am absolutely unhappy with the latest story, the latest developments around the 22 Afghani citizens who have been supposedly seeking asylum in South Africa. The courts, of course, granting them that particular asylum after the Department of Home Affairs had said no to these individuals because it has some serious reservations about them. Reservations which I happen to share. Now, some of you are probably wondering, what's the story about? Well, let me read very quickly from this News 24 piece, which just gives an update, and I'll give you the backstory in a moment and why I don't like the story. There's something fishy about it. Now, of course, as I mentioned, the courts have ruled in favor of 22 Afghan nationals, saying Home Affairs must process their applications. The Gauteng High Court, of course, has nullified a DHA or Home Affairs decision to refuse to grant asylum permits to 22 Afghan nationals. These 22 had effectively reported to the Beitbridge port of entry, that's the border between Zimbabwe and South Africa, on the 16th of February and requested asylum transit visas. Now, let me take a moment from reading this and actually say the following. Guys, I don't have a problem with South Africa in terms of its immigration laws offering asylum as a status, as an immigration status. So please let me clarify issues. I don't actually have a problem with asylum seekers. The issue here is these particular asylum seekers, there's something very it raises goosebumps even as I think about it, because there are a lot of countries between Afghanistan and South Africa, and to be specific, countries that are actually even better at offering asylum seekers refuge than South Africa. Why skip all of those countries to come here? What is it about South Africa specifically that these men felt the need to come here? And who is this United States-based NGO that literally took this matter to court on behalf of these men? There are lots of dots here that need to be joined, which makes the story dodgy. Let me go back to this particular piece that actually details this and says, now that immigration officer at the Beitbridge border refused to do so, that is to give them asylum, as they were all issued multiple entry tourist visas by the government of the Republic of Zimbabwe on 20 January. Now, an American NGO, the Lifeline Foundation, instituted the court application, which now has been successful on their behalf. End of quote. So the courts have basically said, sure, let these guys in. Department of Home Affairs. Home Affairs itself saying, okay, great, we believe in the rule of law. We'll obviously abide by that. Let me quickly read a statement that Home Affairs issued upon receiving this court judgment. Now, the Department of Home Affairs in point 5, they say, will abide by the ruling of the court, and will take all necessary steps to effect the ruling. The DHA will deal with the asylum applications during the asylum process. Now, the decision to abide by this ruling shows that the DHA respects the rule of law. However, this should not be interpreted as opening floodgates to spurious asylum claims. The DHA will not hesitate to fight the cases in court as it has done in this instance. End of quote. And it's that last line about spurious asylum seeking claims, which I actually support and agree with, because South Africa has become a bit of a transit hub for spurious asylum seekers, pardon me, often who do this because not only are they fleeing their home countries because of criminality, but also for terrorist reasons. There are terrorist cells that operate in South Africa. Now, again, quick bookmark. I'm not saying these 22 asylum seekers from Afghanistan are terrorists. However, what I am saying is we don't know who these individuals are, and they are coming from a war-torn country that is governed by a terrorist organization, the Taliban. Now, the issue I again want to just reassert is, who are these men and why the insistence on coming to South Africa? The story is just fishy beyond belief. And the insistence again by a US NGO to get them into South Africa should raise alarm bells. Why dodge or avoid the myriad of other countries along the way which these men could have sought asylum and been just as safe, if not safer, in? Why South Africa in particular? Me asking this question does not make me anti-immigrant or any of the other nonsense people often try and throw at you as a label because they don't want you having this conversation. South Africa has a problem of a breakdown in the rule of law insofar as securing its borders. And there is an abuse at times of various immigration statuses. But nonetheless, let me quickly echo the words perhaps of a senior government official who operates in the international relations space, a one Clayson Monyela, who also echoed this exact same sentiment. In a tweet, he basically said the following. Now, the Ministry of Home Affairs just gave me more details. This is Clayson Monyela speaking, that these 22 Afghans were in Zim for months as tourists. They then tried entering South Africa as asylum seekers. We refused, and they went to Zambia, which also granted them tourist visas. The NGO wants the court to force us to accept them. He says, of course, no. That's, of course, Clayson Monyela, the senior government official, in the international relations. Now, of course, Clayson was tweeting this before the court outcome, but his sentiments in this tweet are what I actually support. I must say this because I know what people are like in the comments. I have no problem with South Africa being a place where asylum seekers, legitimate ones, can actually seek asylum. That's not the issue here. The issue here is these particular 22 Afghans. Why? Why South Africa, and why bypass the myriad of countries that, if they were, let's assume they were walking from Afghanistan to here, would have passed many other countries which could offer them asylum? Why South Africa? And that's the question we South Africans need to start answering to ourselves on the issue generally of our border security and our security as a sovereign country. Why is South Africa becoming the safe haven for some of the most dubious, often even criminal or even terrorist-like individuals? Now, again, don't take it from me. These are just some of the headlines of terrorist cells and terrorist-linked groupings who've been busted in South Africa. There is something super fishy happening here, and we need a strict adherence to the rule of law and the enforcement of the law in order to protect South Africans. All right, after that story, I take you now to Durban, or wait a minute now. Is it Durban though? Because indeed, in this story, a certain video went viral and people were asking themselves the question, is this in Durban? Have a look at this.
There you go. Some people, lucky people.
Yes, that absolute pigsty of an area. And I'm sorry to use that expression because I'm very mindful of the fact that human beings live there. But this is the problem with South Africa. We allow these situations to fester simply because those who are in power, namely the ANC, and because of their ideology, refuse to protect property rights. That is what happens when you refuse to protect property rights. More on that in a second. Let me just confirm something for you. Yes, that is in Durban. It is in the Ispingo area and it's called the Dakota informal settlement. Let me quickly read this piece in The Witness which recently tracked this particular story, given how shocked a lot of Durbanites even were at the state of things. Many Durbanites not even knowing that a place like that exists. And why? Because often we associate those sort of images of shacks who are piled upon each other, trash strewn everywhere, with other parts of Africa. That is a luxury, in inverted commas, that we South Africans used to hold, where we thought, oh no, we would never turn out to be like those countries, we said to ourselves, because we've got the rule of law. Well, we clearly don't. And that's what happens when you allow lawlessness like this and a disrespect for property rights to fester. You have places develop that look like somewhere in Liberia, Monrovia, for example, that has scenes almost reminiscent of this. But nonetheless, as I said, this witness piece citing the following. One of the most alarming is the growth of the Dakota informal settlement in Espingo Beach, a stone's throw from the ocean. This is not a new settlement. Images of its rapid growth have recently been circulating on social media, prompting many residents to flag issues of the settlement's effect on tourism, business, as well as water and sanitation. End of quote. Now, I'm going to come back to this piece because that last line is actually critically important. The ANC's failure to enforce the law and prevent people from building these settlements illegally on any piece of land has done two things. Number one, placed pressure on actual services of the eThekwini municipality, where the eThekwini municipality is unable to render those services not only to those poor people who live there, but also to residents who are unfairly now prejudiced by the development of these informal settlements. Number two, the crime element. Whenever you have informal settlements develop like this, the poor planning of how they're built often means that law enforcement can't get in there. Fire services can't get in there if there is an emergency or if there is a crime. It is absolutely unacceptable how the failure to enforce property rights has a spillover effect that absolutely makes life devastating and terrible for the people who live there and those who live around informal settlements. And the third area, of course, is the poverty. How do you begin to address the poverty in areas like this where there is absolutely no control? The area then becomes run by almost criminal overlord types. In this piece, once again, it cites a DA-KZN spokesperson for human settlements, a one Marlene Naya, who says that this area has the development of, quote, shack lords who rent out rooms in the informal settlements, contributing to the settlement's expansion, which puts a strain on the water, sewage, and electricity infrastructure, end of quote. Now, in the same piece, the eThekwini municipality didn't respond to this particular piece. And I'm not surprised, because this is the one area of many where the ANC government, both at eThekwini, that's Durban municipality, and also nationally, has completely failed. They recognize that their ideology of speaking against property rights. Remember, the ANC are socialists. They are leftists. Leftists do not like the idea of people having property rights. What do I mean by property rights? I mean the idea of you, the individual, being able to say, I own this because I've got a piece of paper that protects my right to my ownership of this. A title deed, for example. Many of the people who spring up and live in these informal settlements do not have title deeds. That is why shacks are never a temporary thing. They're permanent in a sense because of two reasons. One, the failure to give the people who live there title deeds so that they can actually build proper homes there. They can actually invest without the risk or fear of the area being demolished, as is the case when your tenure is precarious, or that is, you stay in a place in an informal basis. You can never build or invest in building yourself a home because you don't know if tomorrow the authorities will come and bulldoze the place, which is ironic because the authorities never come to bulldoze the place. So inevitably, the place stays as it is, as a shack, an informal settlement. And the second area, of course, is the lies by politicians. The lies by politicians who promise free housing. Because that promise is one which takes forever to happen, no one will ever invest in building a home for themselves if there is the promise of something free coming their way. It's what I like to call the free lunch myth. There is no such thing as a free lunch. And politicians continue to perpetuate this lie that free housing is coming. So there's an incentive, of course, to build shacks wherever you can because the free house will come your way. Now, bear in mind, this is not me attacking poor people. Again, poor people will always exist. It's how we relate and deal with the issues of poor people and poverty which makes the difference of whether those people escape their poverty or stay poor. And this situation is one of those. We're going to cover the story in detail, maybe a full-on episode, because I think it is important for us to hear from the people who live in informal settlements like this. These people aren't bad. There's nothing inherent about them which is bad. They're just poor. And how we deal with poor people and poverty in this country is perhaps where the sort of ideas I advocate for are heads and shoulders above the status quo. The status quo is ANC politicians who like seeing informal settlements like this because they can create a sense of dependency in the people who live there. People who live there are dependent on the lies and promises of politicians. People who live there are dependent on effectively waiting for municipalities to do something for them as opposed to empowering them to do something for themselves. This is where ideas like mine of liberty, property rights, and indeed the rule of law are important, where if you give people, if you empower them with property rights and you empower them with resources to effectively build their own homes, create their own opportunities, you'd be able to beat the effects of poverty like informal settlements. But nonetheless, as I said, we'll do a full-on episode on this, so stay tuned to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Okay, it's that time of the show on a Friday where we either have a champ of the week or a Moemish of the week. Moemish being either someone who is a loser or has done something which is absolutely a flop. Who is our Moemish of today's show? Our Moemish of the week is Cyril Ramaphosa. Yep, that's right. Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of the Republic and the President of the ANC, is our Moemish of the week. And why is he the Moemish of the week? What's the flop that he did? Well, you'll remember at the beginning of the week where we covered that story of Cyril Ramaphosa's response in an affidavit. Now, he's being taken to court by the UDM and a few other parties on the issue of load shedding and the failure of government to honor its constitutional obligation to provide electricity. Now, Cyril, in response, said, no, electricity is not the constitutional response of any of the three spheres of government. What? And I asked you, what is Cyril Ramaphosa smoking? Yeah, what is he smoking? Because of course electricity is the responsibility of the state because they made it the responsibility of the state. Now, I believe it shouldn't. I believe the private sector should be providing electricity. Eskom should be broken up into two entities. The one entity private, in other words, generation, where the power plants are, the generating of electricity. And the one thing that could remain in the hands of the state is the transmission, the actual power lines and the like. That could remain with the state, fine, whatever. But the point is, the private sector should be producing this. This is what the ANC government has been refusing to do because it prefers Eskom being the sole provider of electricity and owned by the state. And because it's the sole provider of electricity, it is a single point of failure. And that is exactly why we are having load shedding in the way in which we are having it since 2008, people. Let's not forget that. Seemingly, Cyril Ramaphosa, that idiot douchebag of a president, has forgotten that very point, saying, no. It's suggesting, of course, in his affidavit, no. Government doesn't provide, or none of the three spheres of government provide electricity. Oh, no, he says. Eskom does. Eskom is a standalone entity. No, it's not. Eskom is owned by the government. And I argued as I did, and I'll argue again, that sort of language, that sophistry, that nonsense, that dribble that politicians use is actually them disrespecting you and assuming that you are an idiot in this equation. Cyril Ramaphosa is not being cute or clever with the statement. He's actually being disrespectful to you. Government has made electricity provision its sole responsibility, and it, including its president, Cyril Ramaphosa, must take responsibility when they don't provide that service to you. Cyril Ramaphosa, you are the Moemish of the week. All right, that's it from this episode of Vuka Nazo. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a wonderful week of the show. Remember, on your way out, please hit that like button and more importantly, share the stream. Have more of your friends watch Vuka Nazo and help them wake up with the news analysis. With that being said, remember please to visit our website. Find us at bigdaddyliberty.com. Guys, I'll see you on Sunday for Liberty and Friends. Remember, we come to you Sundays 8 p.m. where we wrap up the news week with a panel of friends with us. Or alternatively, I'll see you again next week, Monday, for another episode of Vuka Nazo.